Good evening and thank you for joining us. The chief of the Ojibways of Onigaming First Nation calls it racism. He wants answers after paramedics allegedly parked at the edge of the reserve while a man in his community died waiting for medical help. Chief Jeff Kopanes took his outcry public, saying on Twitter, "Today a young First Nations man died in Onigaming. 911 was called. The ambulance parked at the edge of our reserve and wouldn't come help. As his family provided chest compressions, the paramedics let this young man die. This is racism." This photo allegedly shows the ambulance parked outside the community. The ambulance falls under the jurisdiction of the Kenora District Services Board. In a written statement, CAO Henry Wall called the incident tragic, saying they will fully review what happened and have requested a Ministry of Health investigation. Minister of Indigenous Services Patty Hajdu commented on Twitter saying not being able to access urgent care is unacceptable. A Thunder Bay jury heard more upsetting details today about the murder of an 11-year-old boy. His mother, 37-year-old Courtney LaBelle, is on trial for second-degree murder and aggravated assault, and a warning to viewers, this story is disturbing. The court previously heard testimony that LaBelle stabbed her son 31 times before her father ran in and tackled her to the floor. Today in court, the jury heard from the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy, who said the boy's death was mainly caused by 2 stab wounds to the heart. The court also heard from the first police officer to arrive at the Victoria Avenue home on New Year's morning of 2020. Staff Sergeant Chris Carlucci says he saw the victim covered in blood and the grandfather restraining the mother until police arrived to put her in handcuffs. The Crown has now concluded its evidence and the defense will call witnesses next week. The full details can be found on tbnewswatch.com. Officials at the Thunder Bay Regional Hospital are responding to the Ford government's announcement this week that the controversial Bill 7 will be implemented next Wednesday. The legislation allows seniors to be moved from hospital beds to a long-term care home not of their choosing while they await their preferred location. An elderly patient in Northern Ontario can be moved up to 150 kilometers away. If they refuse and decide to stay in hospital, they'll be charged $400 a day. The provincial government says the legislation will free up much-needed beds in emergency rooms. Regional Hospital CEO Rhonda Crocker-Ellicott agrees and believes Bill 7 is urgently needed.
The balancing and the challenge against that is we have acute care patients waiting in the emergency department that are desperate to get into an acute care bed. So it's the balancing of the trauma patient and the heart attack waiting on a stretcher in the emergency department and an overwhelmed emergency department, and the balancing of where can individuals get the appropriate level of care that they need.
Crocker-Ellicott says she understands, however, that moving elderly patients can be very difficult on families. The Thunder Bay ID Action Group is calling on the province to remove barriers to accessing a birth certificate. More than 1,000 people who might not otherwise have one were helped out during the course of a 3-year study, according to researchers from LU. The report was released today on International Identity Day. Lee Noonan has more.
Marshall Arbor is turning 70 this year, and he still doesn't have a correct birth certificate, but at least the one he has now spells his name right.
They got my name and everything, my birthday, it was all good, but now they got my mom's name wrong, right? But in order to change that, I have to get her birth certificate, which is impossible.
Arbor is a longtime volunteer with Norwest Community Health Centers. Staff there have been helping him sort out his birth certificate issues, but it's taken years to make any headway, and he says without them, he would have just given up.
Without a birth certificate, it's impossible to access a number of programs and services, including income maintenance, housing, even going to a food bank requires having ID. We're calling on the provincial government to waive the fees for birth certificates and to reduce the onerous paperwork requirements and the requirement for a professional guarantor for the birth certificate application.
Lakehead University has just released a report detailing the barriers people here face in trying to get Ontario birth certificates. Cost is the most commonly cited barrier, followed by the difficulty of the bureaucratic process.
Not everyone knows the name of the doctor that delivered them when they were born or knows how much they weighed. And those are just some of the things that people are expected to be able to provide in order to get their birth certificate.
Chris Sanders, one of the study's authors, says he was shocked by the scope of the problem.
We've submitted hundreds and hundreds of applications, and these are all people who, by and large, from what our research is finding, these are people who have tried multiple times to submit birth certificate applications and have often just sort of given up.
Their research also shows that the issue is a significant burden for local nonprofits who've banded together to form the ID Action Group of Thunder Bay.
This is above and beyond the scope of the services that we provide, like the mandate of our agencies, but we're trying to fill this gap by working cooperatively together, because our clients do present with this as being one of the most significant barriers in order to get them to that next step of solving the actual problem that they're having that we can assist them with.
Arbor is now working with Norwest staff on getting his status card. The research shows the issue disproportionately affects Indigenous people, particularly when they live in rural or fly-in communities. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Earlier this week, we brought you the story of Thunder Bay Superior North MPP Lise Vaugeois living on the so-called social assistance diet, spending less than $100 every 2 weeks on food in order to raise awareness about the struggles of those with disabilities who are forced to live on ODSP. She and other NDP members who are taking part held a press conference today. Siobhan Morris reports from Queen's Park.
The last 10 days have been carb-heavy for NDP MPPs testing the ODSP diet. They're trying to pressure the government to double payments.
Porridge and eggs and toast and, pastas and rice.
They've budgeted $95 for 2 weeks of groceries.
The type of foods that you can afford on this amount of money or less are not healthy and nutritious foods. That they don't make you feel good, they don't fill you up.
Squeezing in vegetables has been a challenge. Those who made the effort found they'd run out of money or food.
If I didn't plan well enough in the morning, I'd get through partway through the day, or we'd be sitting in the legislature and all of a sudden I felt like I couldn't think.
The experience has been eye-opening.
If I'm falling apart after a day of not planning my meal well enough, what is it like for somebody who is doing this every single day?
The province is increasing payments for ODSP recipients this month by 5%, putting the maximum individuals can receive at just over $2,000. Legislation is coming for annual increases tied to inflation.
That was CTV's Siobhan Morris. Ontario's top doctor says that monkeypox cases in the province peaked in July. Dr. Kieran Moore says the total number of active cases in mid-July peaked at roughly 16 to 18 cases a day. He says more than 32,000 people have been immunized against monkeypox in Ontario, and most of the new cases are travel-related, particularly from American hotspots. As of this week, there have been 656 confirmed cases of monkeypox here in Ontario. Northwest Region OPP say the sudden death of an elderly man in Shunya last week is now considered to be non-criminal in nature. On September 7th, OPP performed a well-being check at a home on East Floral Beach Road. When officers arrived, they found the body of 76-year-old Risto Lettinen, who appeared to have suffered serious injuries leading up to his death. OPP initially called it suspicious and brought in forensic and criminal investigation units. But now police say they don't believe there was foul play. However, the investigation continues. A pair of drug busts yesterday by Thunder Bay police have led to charges against 6 people in total. First, a pair of teenagers, a 16-year-old girl from Toronto and an 18-year-old Barrie man, were arrested in connection to a suspected home takeover on the 300 block of Vickers Street North. Officers seized cocaine, cash, and drug trafficking paraphernalia. Then later in the day, 4 people were arrested on the 200 block of Algoma Street. Police seized about $24,000 worth of cocaine and fentanyl, as well as cash and drug trafficking materials. Starting next week, Thunder Bay residents can expect to receive voter information letters in the mail for the upcoming municipal election. The letters contain a voter ID number and PIN for online voting, information on advanced in-person voting, including drive-through options, and voting locations on Election Day on October 24th. They also contain information on accessible voting, a voter helpline, and a free transit pass to get to the polls. Online voting begins on October 5th and will be open 24 hours a day until voting closes at 8 o'clock on election night. City Clerk Krista Power encourages residents to look over the information on the voter card. If anyone's information is incorrect, they should contact the clerk's office.
We have a voter helpline, which is 622-VOTE, that will be available Monday to Friday. We also will have revision days, so we'll be popping up all over the city towards the end of September. We'll be at Goods & Co., Thunder Bay Country Market, also be at Intercity Mall, and people can bring their voter information letter, or if they don't have one, bring ID, and we can make any changes to the voters list there. They can also make changes on voting day as well.
Well, residents who don't receive a voter letter or aren't able to make the necessary revisions are still able to vote. They just have to go to a polling station on October 24th with identification, and they'll be added to the voters list. The start of the school year can be tough for students at Dennis Franklin Cromartie High School, many of whom have flown in from remote communities to get their education. Thankfully, they've got the Wake the Giant concert to look forward to tomorrow, and today an event called the DFC Experience offered some fun workshops to help make them more comfortable in their new environment. Vasilios Bellows reports.
The DFC Experience is a yearly event as part of Wake the Giant to help Indigenous students new to the city get more comfortable through fun and interactive workshops. They included activities such as cooking and baking, visual arts and culture projects, playing basketball or volleyball with LU Thunderwolves, and more. Organizer Matthew Tilbury says the event is the perfect way to take some stress off new students who are having to manage a pretty big change.
It's kind of an orientation event to welcome all of our students back to the city, back to the school, and to have a fun day trying out new things. It's a chance for them to, like you said, have a little bit of a laid-back workshop, maybe open up a little bit, chat with their peers, and meet some of the wonderful staff putting on these workshops.
It didn't seem to matter which workshop was attended, as every room had excited and engaged students. And after hearing from them, the event without a doubt provided unique experiences while alleviating some of their stress.
It's a lot more easier, and especially for the new ones that are coming in, to get to know the areas of DFC, going to new places in the new rooms to experience new stuff in there.
Had a great morning, had a fun class, cooking some donuts. Churros. Yeah. Churros, more like churros, yeah.
The workshop I'm in right now is with Neon Dreams, and we're writing a song about leaving home and coming out. It's a really diverse topic too, because everybody can relate to it.
And of course, the big event comes this Saturday with the Wake the Giant Music Festival, which was definitely creating a buzz with the students.
Kind of excited, but at the same time overwhelmed because there will be a lot of people there. But I think tomorrow's going to be pretty fun.
Maybe one artist that you're really pumped for? Or?
Steve Aoki.
Barbie girl or whatever.
Aqua?
Aqua, yeah. I want to go watch Aqua perform.
After their workshop, students at DFC were then able to take a bus ride around Thunder Bay. It allowed them to familiarize themselves with the city, all to make for a more comfortable transition into the school year. Vasilios Bellows, TBT News.
Meanwhile, an event that complements Wake the Giant was held last night at the Chanterelle on Park Avenue. Feed the Giant is a fundraiser organized by a former Thunder Bay resident who's now a top chef in Toronto. Hayden Johnston put together a similar event in 2019 that raised about $14,000 for Dennis Franklin Cromartie High School and its proposed student residents. The swanky affair was put on hold due to the pandemic the past 2 years, but it made a big comeback last night. More than 200 people bought tickets for the event, which featured over a dozen top chefs preparing unique hors d'oeuvres and other delicacies. There was also live music and art installations by Indigenous artists. Johnston explains what convinced him to travel back to his hometown to support the cause.
Feed the Giant is sort of a two-parter. It's an opening party for Wake the Giant, sort of to start the weekend off. And the more important part is it's a fundraiser. We're here raising money to build a student living center for Dennis Franklin Cromartie. So every dollar raised tonight goes towards that. I've said this before, I don't know how to do many things well other than cook food, so I knew that any way that I could be involved would have to be food related, and we sort of came up with the Feed the Giant event.
Johnston says they expect to far surpass the 2019 fundraising total. So Fiona, to use a sports analogy, those are kind of the undercard events, and then the main event goes tomorrow. And of course, we're hoping that the rain tapers off that we've seen for the past couple of days.
Well, I'll leave that for a couple of moments because today did not bode well for the weekend. We didn't see much movement in temperatures, a low of 11, a high of 13. So that's a 2-degree warm up during the day. And the rain just never seemed to stop. It was either light rain, heavy rain with pretty gusty winds, at times up to 40 kilometers per hour from the east-northeast. So it's just been a very wet day. Yesterday, a total of close to 30 millimeters fell. Considering how much heavier the rain has been today, I think we're going to far surpass that. Now, if we take a look what's going on throughout the region, Fort Frances starting to dry out. They're currently cloudy at 15. Kenora, Dryden, Atikokan, Upsala, all around the 11-12 degree range. Heading up into Red Lake, they're also at 11, as is Sioux Lookout and Armstrong. Believe it or not, it warms up as you head further north. As we head eastward to Greenstone, they're currently under cloudy skies. They have had a fair amount of rain today as well. 10 Celsius at this hour, Marathon 12. And Sault Ste. Marie, well, the rain just keeps on coming. They're at 16 Celsius. Now, here in the city of Thunder Bay, not going to cool off all that much. We're dropping back down to a low of 11. And yes, more rain, more thunderstorms, possibly up to 15 millimeters. And as you can tell from the winds, still kind of gusty at times, 15 to 41 kilometers per hour. But that all-important question, because there's a lot going on this weekend besides Wake the Giant and the Terry Fox Run and some time trials for dog agility competitors. There's a lot going on this weekend, and it's looking like it's going to dry out somewhat for Saturday. Might even see a little bit of sunshine. Add to that, temperatures are going to be rising, potentially near 20 degrees, so a little above normal, and the humidex is going to kick in as well. Unfortunately, don't count your chickens because we are not done with the rain just yet. We are expecting it to return somewhat on Sunday, and I'll have more details with the actual temperatures and timelines later on in the news hour.
Okay, well, I'm counting the chickens, and a lot of big events tomorrow. Looking good. There's some good news there, Fiona, and we appreciate that. Well, the late Queen Elizabeth II continues to lie in state in London, and those long lineups that we told you about yesterday got even longer today as people come from around the world to say goodbye. We'll have the details as your Friday News Hour continues.
We know that so many of the people we represent have been saddened, some shaken by her loss.
The Queen's 4 children held a vigil tonight by her coffin in London's Westminster Hall, where the 96-year-old monarch's body is lying in state. Crowds waiting to get into the hall were so immense that lineups were paused today, and King Charles made his first visit to Wales as king. Here's Paul Workman in London.
This ritual began in 1936 as the Vigil of the Princes, when male children stood beside the coffin of King George V in this same grand Westminster Hall. For the Queen, her 3 sons and only daughter, Princess Anne, made up the honor guard, all in uniform, including Prince Andrew, for the first time since he was stripped of his military titles. Solemnly and silently approaching their mother's coffin, turning outwards, crossing their hands and lowering their heads, and remained there for a somber and motionless 11 minutes as people continued to walk by and pay their respects. Earlier in the day, the wait time for the public to enter the Great Hall rose to 24 hours, and holding areas had to be closed after reaching capacity.
That's the best thing to do right now, is to send you guys home.
To the huge disappointment of people determined to see their Queen.
We've come a long way today, all of us, haven't we? So, all different parts of the country, so we need to pay our respects to the Queen. That's what we've come to say goodbye, really. It's a closure.
Disappointment that suddenly turned to happiness when the line started moving again. With his visit to Wales, the King's confirmation as monarch is now complete, where his elevation to the throne began as a 9-year-old boy, given the title Prince of Wales, and where he returned today as king to accept condolences of the nation.
We know that so many of the people we represent have been saddened, some shaken by her loss, and they hold you and your family in their hearts and prayers at this time.
Diolch o galon ichi.
Charles replied in Welsh, a few words at least, before switching to English.
I take up my new duties with immense gratitude for the privilege of having been able to serve as Prince of Wales.
And then heard the unofficial Welsh confirmation from the crowd outside. Paul Workman, CTV News, London.
Meanwhile, back in this country, the tributes continue in Toronto for the police officer who was killed in Monday's shooting rampage in the GTA. Today, Mayor John Tory visited police headquarters to sign a book of condolences for Constable Andrew Hong. Janice Golding was there.
A show of solidarity. Officers united in grief on the night Constable Andrew Hong was killed. An impromptu honor guard forming Monday evening with officers from across the region, both on and off duty, lining the route as a motorcade carried Constable Hong's body to the chief coroner's office.
I hope that his family take some solace. Well, it's hard to take much solace at a time like this when this kind of senseless tragedy takes place, that they can take some solace from the extraordinary respect and affection that has been shown for Officer Hong.
Today, inside police headquarters, there is a memorial alongside a book of condolence. Politicians, uniformed officers, and the public all expressing their sorrow at the senseless shooting of a Toronto police constable.
I feel sorry for the family, and this is a tragic loss that we've done. So I just want to pay my respects as well. So it's a sad day.
While the community and fellow colleagues mourn for Hong and for 38-year-old Shaquille Ashraf, a Milton Auto Shop owner who also lost his life in Monday's deadly rampage, police continue to search for answers. Investigators now saying they believe the gunman in Monday's killing spree was looking for a police officer and lay in wait for more than 2 hours at a Mississauga Tim Hortons before shooting Hong at point-blank range. We've also learned accused killer Sean Petrie had an extensive criminal record, including convictions for assault, armed robbery, and various firearms offenses. The 40-year-old had also been placed on the national flagging system in 2007 after being deemed at high risk to reoffend.
This whole matter is a complicated one in terms of people and, when they should be allowed to keep their liberty pending trial, and also when they've served their sentence, should they be given a chance to come back into the community. It's a complicated matter. I have been pretty consistent in saying that I think at this moment in time, without referring to any specific instance, the system is broken. It's not working as well as it needs to work to protect people.
Constable Andrew Hong was a 22-year veteran of the Toronto Police Force and spent 19 years at traffic services. The 48-year-old leaves behind his wife and 2 daughters.
That was CTV's Janice Golding. There are also tributes for another GTA officer who was killed this week. Constable Andrew Gillespie of York Region Police was killed in a head-on collision on Wednesday. The driver, accused in his death, now faces multiple charges. Beth McDonnell reports.
An expression of sympathy after a fatal head-on collision. A book of condolences for York Regional Police Constable Travis Gillespie. Some of the comments already: "I will miss you every day," reads one. "Rest in peace. Thanks for your service," reads another. The 38-year-old officer was killed Wednesday around 6 a.m. on his way to work on Major Mackenzie near Warden in Markham. The crash between Gillespie's white Honda Accord and the driver behind the wheel of a Porsche Cayenne. The 23-year-old accused appeared via video link in court today. Haozhu Zhao has been charged with impaired driving causing death and dangerous driving causing death. A few procedural details were handled. That was done with the help of a Mandarin translator. Gillespie is the second police officer death in the GTA this week. He is survived by his parents, loved ones, and colleagues. His image next to Toronto Police Constable Andrew Hong. The book of condolences will be sent to Gillespie's family. This one of 5 books set up across York Region police stations to help people mourn and pay their respects.